Hey guys, Jason Haber here with FutureCity. My guest today, Manhattan's Borough President, Gale Brewer. Hear what Gale has to say about what cities need today to be successful and what they're going to need to do tomorrow in order to thrive. It's a great conversation. I hope you enjoy it. Check it out. All right, Gale Brewer. Manhattan Borough President, Gale Brewer.
Yes, Jason Haber.
Also, I like to say, the most popular elected official in New York. Is that still the case?
You're still reading city and state. That's dated. That's
maybe
dated.
not with people I know, by the way. the real estate people I know.
Although I'm not popular with them at all. No. But
generally, that's what I read. But I think the reason that is because you are in so many issues, right? Like some elected officials just have like their one basket that they focus on. I think what's interesting about how you've run the office is that there is no one basket. Like right. You just sort of...
Yeah, I mean, I do still hope that I can bring the data and all of the technology issues civic
right.
as opposed to the general data. And we've tried to do that. We can talk more about it in terms of the open data. And we all are working on housing one way or the other.
Yeah.
But I am, unfortunately, somebody say, yeah, I can work on that. Oh, yeah, that sounds interesting.
Right. And then you dive right in.
Hard, but yes, we try.
So I want to talk about climate change first, because everyone talks about climate change. Oh, we have to do something. But you're actually working on something right now specifically related to the city that I think is important for all cities to look at. Can you talk about that?
Well, that's the issue of Sandy.
Yeah.
Sandy was a big storm. It came to Lower Manhattan as well as other parts of the city. But in my case, it came to Lower Manhattan. I am shocked at how much work has to be done to address another storm or just plain old water increasing in terms of its height. So right now, as we speak, we're in the midst of deciding how high a park from Montgomery to 25th Street needs to be raised in order to address storm surge or just plain old hurricanes. And it could be 8 feet, it could be 10 feet.
Wow.
Moving a park, which is huge,
right.
from like I said, that length, ball fields, soccer fields, barbecue, families, New York City Housing Authority families, right there, for 3 to 5 years without a park is a really challenging situation, and $1.4 billion.
And the only reason you're doing this, by the way, is
to deal with the next storm.
Right.
And it wouldn't be taking place. And there would be perhaps other alternatives that have been addressed. We even hired a consultant to come from the Netherlands to help the community address, is this the right answer? So that's an example. And then, believe it or not, even in Lower Manhattan, South Street Seaport, Wall Street area, and Battery Park City is doing their own opportunity to make sure no storms come to their buildings.
Right.
And all of this is also going to be planned for the Wall Street and the South Street Seaport. And in between, we're literally, I call them life preservers, but they're some kind of ballards that will make sure that in the interim, until we spend another $1 billion perhaps in that area, and now we're coming up with some plans for that. So you can see, figuring out what to do about a storm is our one example of climate change, because we wouldn't have had this storm before.
Right, and there's the East Side Resiliency Project. That fits into that too,
is.
right?
It's what I call the park. I'm just trying to make it very simple. Is the East Side Coastal Resiliency Project is exactly what we're talking about, but we have to continue it because it still has to address Lower Manhattan, meaning Wall Street and South Street Seaport area.
And how what's the total cost of that look like?
Well, literally from Battery to Montgomery, Lower East Side, the one you're referring to as the East Side Coastal Resiliency, that's $1.4 billion. And the one that I just described, Wall Street, and the one South Street Seaport could in fact be the same price.
Wow. It's staggering numbers. And but the word, you know what? If you don't do it, the cost of the next storm is 10 times that.
That's exactly it. And I just want to emphasize that the New York City Housing Authority residents live, tons of them, along that park, and they were not only flooded, as was the hospital and some of the private homes, but you know how NYCHA is. So it took months and months and not even years for them to get back, and they had no elevators, carrying water up and down, etc. So they really don't want that to happen again.
Right. There's just you just can't wait. You have to do it now. But I think there are a lot of issues in New York that are real time now issues. Housing is another one of those. You've been active in NYCHA, for example, and you see what's happening there with people with mold in their homes, holes in the ceilings, bathrooms that don't work. It seems like it's getting worse and worse.
Well, the issue there, Mr. Greg Ruff, who is the new chair, he seems good. I just was with him the other night at Johnson Houses in East Harlem. The price tag is huge, $32 billion, thereabouts. After a few B's, it's hard to know when it ends.
It sounds like it's fake money at that point,
but
right?
Yes, but the issue is how do you get it? So he's got a federal strategy, a state strategy, and a city strategy. This is the problem. I was at Polo Grounds the other day touring with the New York City Housing Authority and some of their maintenance people. Those pipes are 1964. That was the last time. And you, as somebody in real estate, know you cannot have a pipe that is going to be dated from 1964. So what does NYCHA do? They patch the bathroom where there is a problem. That doesn't work.
It's like a time bomb waiting to go off.
Upstairs, downstairs, and the roof.
Yeah.
So and then there's another problem, plumbers. Now, plumbers love to go, I believe, to new buildings that they're building that have nobody living in them. So I asked NYCHA, where are you getting your plumbers?
Right.
Big problem. They don't have enough plumbers in the city of New York who want to bid these jobs for reasons that are obvious. When am I going to get paid?
Yeah.
But then they don't want to occupy. They don't want to work in occupied apartments. So it's deep, the challenges. Even if you have the funding, which is challenging in itself, how do you get the personnel, the skilled personnel, to do the work?
Right. Fascinating. Next issue that I want to talk to you about is on transportation. So yesterday, 6 o'clock in the afternoon, I was on 14th Street in the middle of the street, and it was like being in like a park. I mean, there was no cars. And people were all confused, by the way. People were like looking around, like, what's happening here? Like, it's actually, I think it's worked better than they ever could have imagined in the first week.
Definitely. I mean, I was the first elected official. It's a controversial project to support the busway, as it's called, in terms of, yes, if you're delivering, you can go on the street. If you're, obviously, the bus can go on the street. If you are accessoride, there's provisions for the seniors, et cetera. But if you're just a car driving, you cannot go on 14th Street. I believe, if I remember correctly, it was a guessed to be an 8% increase. I believe it's a 30% increase in the bus speed. And people are taking pictures out their windows.
And that's just in the first week. People still have to learn this. And so people thought the first week would be a little messy. And it's been the opposite. If this is the result in the first week, it's, The
one thing I worry about, I have a lot of actual friends and certainly the seniors, there are fewer bus stops.
Right.
So that bus moves.
Right.
In addition to the lack of cars, there are fewer stops that enable the bus to move. I worry a little bit about the seniors because I want to make sure that with a walker, that they can get to the bus stop.
Right. No, and I agree. I think from my perspective, looking at this as a city planning issue, for so many years, for 50 years during the Moses era, we had this sort of car-centric planning, right, where it was more roads would led to more cars, which just led to more traffic, which then led to more roads, which led to more traffic, which led to more. I mean, it was just this weird treadmill that we were on, and we were like stuck on it. And not all cities were. And the inverse is now proving to be true. If you remove access to cars on roads, there are just less cars. Right. And it works.
I'm excited about it. I think that we are, and I have to credit Corey Johnson, the Speaker of the Council, because he has a road plan,
Right.
And you see it. I mean, we now have, I don't know what's legal and illegal anymore, but we have scooters, bicycles, and all different kinds of bicycles, some legal, some not, but they're out there. Delivery and leisure and work and commuter. I see tons of electric skateboards and scooters and everything in between. And then, of course, you have cars, trucks. We do, I think, because of the Amazon phenomenon, have a lot more deliveries. Yeah. And so then how do you address the double parking? Because you cannot have, bike path parking, double parking, triple parking. That all has to be worked out. So there's some hope that while we're addressing these streets, we do need to figure out when should deliveries be taking place and how can they be taking place. Because commerce is really important.
Right, absolutely. Do you think that do you think we're going to be now seeing much more of this on other streets now?
Yes, I don't think I know.
Really?
The commissioner Trottenberg is so excited about her bus.
Right.
That she's looking for other streets, yes.
Right. And then I think this accelerates, I know this is another controversial issue with the the 60th Street zone for
Congestion
commuters from
pricing.
congestion pricing. How do you think that'll be received now?
Well, I mean, I think that's a technology issue too. I mean,
Right.
we have to figure out 60th Street. I hope people don't think they're going to be able to park there. I mean, there's a fear in the community that people are going to drive into Manhattan and then find a place in the 60s to park their
Right,
car.
and
You
then-
can't do it now.
Yeah.
So I don't know how they're going to. So one of the issues is how do you address that either real or perceived fear? And I don't know the answer to that. But then you have, if the highways are going to be open to traffic without any kind of a fee, then how do you handle the internal technology for literally bringing in the Easy Pass and the contraption
Right.
that goes with it? I know it might mostly be on streetlights,
Right.
et cetera, but I, as somebody who pays attention to the tech, I want to pay attention to this tech. And the ACLU has been brought to my attention, the Civil Liberties Union. What happens to all that data?
Right.
These things
Well,
are
that's
important.
a really good question. Right.
I thought it was
Yeah.
because there's
Yeah.
a lot of data here.
Right. And you do a lot of work with big data, and we talk a lot about smart cities. How do you see data being used now? It's more valuable than oil, right? So data is extremely valuable, but what's the right way to use it?
Well, we're the most data-rich city because we have the 311 data.
Right.
That's incredibly helpful, hopefully. I mean, how do you use it for planning without compromising people's health data or other kinds of data that is not supposed to be public? So I think we're still getting there, but it can be used for planning. Let me give you an example. Smart trash, for instance. There's some discussion now about the nighttime carters for the commercial.
Right.
How many should be picking up in a zone as opposed to, I think, 90
Yep.
who are going around our city now. That's a good data example, right? How that data could be used more effectively. I think actually Columbia University and some other universities are trying to work with the National Science Foundation on how to be a smarter city, exactly what you're talking about. I mean, we're using data. Actually, we were talking today about just using it in terms of housing development and faith-based buildings.
Yeah.
Which ones are vulnerable, which ones aren't, which ones could use some housing on the next door lot. So, data can be used to plan the city. I think that it hasn't reached its potential yet. Mm-hmm. And I think that's what a lot of people are trying to figure out, certainly on the street issue that we talked about earlier for transportation.
But it's also a balancing act, too, because privacy advocates are very worried about what's coming.
Right. I mean, even underground. You think we know what's underground?
Right.
Not exactly. That's another place where data could be more useful. But sometimes the cable companies don't want to share data. That's another issue.
Right. Well, now when we have the subways are going to be changing over to the app, there's people are asking questions already about tracking people on the subways.
No, I think that's, again, not figured out yet.
Yeah.
The whole issue. And I hadn't thought about it in terms of the Easy Pass, but it's very different when you are going on the highway, to Albany or Buffalo.
Right.
Because that data is not captured in the same personal way that it will be here in the city.
But it seems like there are so many points now where the city's going to capture your movements,
Mm-hmm.
and not just your movements, technically maybe your purchases, and then could someone use those for nefarious purposes to manipulate you? Right. If you don't trust government, which a lot of folks don't, you're going to have a lot of concerns there.
I think it's a great question that needs to be addressed, and you also have to look at race and issues that are. We now have a situation in Washington where people who don't have documentation are very nervous. How is that data going to be captured?
Particularly with the census coming up, and that was actually going to be my next question. I have this concern that we're going to see cities, not just New York, but major cities, shortchanged in the census because a lot of folks aren't going to want to answer the door because they're afraid.
We're very nervous about it. There's so many different issues. For instance, there are vast communities, particularly in the Orthodox community in Brooklyn, as an example, they do not use the internet. So here's one example, because the first take on August 1st, 2020 is we're supposed to fill it out online. Mm-hmm. So then you have the senior issue, too.
Right.
You have the homebound issue. We're going to be training the people who deliver meals to the homebound, because that might be the only person you trust.
Right.
So that's another example. And then, of course, you have all of those who are undocumented, even though, quote unquote, that question are you a citizen is not on the census form. Everybody's going to think it is.
Everyone's going to be concerned about that.
And so they are going to say, I'm not filling it out.
Right.
So yes, we're hiring, the city's hiring, the federal government's hiring. We've actually given even funding to small organizations as an example to help the faith-based leaders in their congregations write sermons for their parish. This is what the census means. So in other words, help them figure out that it's okay, because sometimes you might trust your faith-based leader. Everybody's trying everything. We got, 183 languages or more in the city of New York. So those language bearers are going to be hired. We actually went early on to Providence, Rhode Island, which was the only test site last year. And the only reason the Portuguese community there filled it out was because the woman who had been at the community college as head of the Portuguese department was now head of the census group. They trusted her. So it's a real trust issue.
And do you get in your office, do you actually get immigration, people who are afraid of ICE, or do you handle those kinds of issues?
We get some, to be honest. We work with the Congress member and either Congressman Nadler, obviously Espaillat, and certainly Nydia Velasquez, Carolyn Maloney. We tend to work with the members. We do get a lot of we know that less parents are going to PTA meetings.
Right, because they're worried about ICE showing up?
Yep.
Is that it?
And just their name being on a piece of paper that could, in fact, track them. Wow. Same thing with public hospitals. We know because we have been talking, kids are going to school, but the parents are not going to the PTA meetings. And we all know the most important aspect of your child's education is to talk to the teacher and participate in education of your child.
And this is obviously a new thing since 2017.
100%.
100%.
Never heard this problem before.
Wow. So it shows you even in New York, we're not immune, or no city's immune.
Well, we also have this public charge. I don't know if on October 14th, 5 days from now, we will have the fact that if you are ever going to apply for a green card, you should be very careful about what benefits you access at this point. This is another Trump-ism. So one woman gave a great example. We had a forum on it. She works with the West African community. They come as doctors and engineers to the United States, but they don't have their MCAPs, so they don't have their boards, they don't have their training. They get it in the past by getting benefits so they can figure out how to make a living later on. And they do well, but they need that year or so. Now they're not going to be applying.
Wow.
So it has so many deep implications, that gentleman from Pennsylvania Avenue.
Right. Yeah.
Deep.
From Fifth Avenue.
From Fifth Avenue.
Yeah.
Or from Queens.
Or from Queens. Either way. No good.
No good.
A lot of people feel a sense of helplessness about that, by the way. What do you recommend for people who aren't in government and ways that they want to be involved in helping these kinds of situations?
I mean, I think it's particularly in New York, people are very aware. I think that they, need to pay attention, as we always do, to pay attention to whatever you want to do between now and the election. I don't want to be political about this, but whether it's a community board, stay informed, be very aware that people who are poor and undocumented, be supportive of them. I know some of the churches and synagogues are harboring them, for example. Contribute to the food pantries, places where that kind of individual needs the most support. And I think you should know that places like the Coalition of Immigrant Rights, the Mayor's Office of Immigration, they are really working hard. And all the groups that work with these communities. So I think support them. That would be good. Of course, if you want to get involved politically, I'm supportive of that, whether it's through the political club or a campaign. But this guy he's really doing damage, and not just the kind that's on the front page of the newspapers. That's the thing. Public charge, people don't know what that is. That's, Russia, Ukraine, they're on the front page. Behind the scenes are these really challenging aspects of public policy that are hurting people who are undocumented.
I don't think people are aware of that, but I think what happens is when people start to get plucked out of your community or in your social network, all of a sudden becomes much more real. Absolutely. Right? And that's starting to to happen.
Yeah, no, it's true.
Yeah.
I mean, and so even if you quote unquote have aspects of where ICE isn't supposed to go, they seem to still go there, and
Right.
the fear is there. I've been to I don't know how many demonstrations outside of 26 Federal Plaza, supportive of people who were going in just to report,
Yeah.
and literally hoping they come out.
Wow.
It's a very deep fear, and you're standing there with the wife and child,
And you don't know if you'll see them again.
You don't know if you're going to see them again. Yeah.
Wow.
Sometimes they come out, sometimes they don't. I've been in both situations. The good news is the unions have been very supportive, whether there is a member of their union or not.
Yeah.
They've been very supportive.
Wow. I haven't heard those stories, but that's tough. Yeah.
Very tough. I mean, there's one family that it took about a year. He and his wife both work in New York, 25 years. She's documented here, and the 5 children are, but he wasn't.
And they're paying taxes.
Oh, everything.
Yeah.
The good news is she worked for a hotel, and he worked for, I believe, a restaurant of some kind. So they both had unions.
Yeah.
So the unions got together, and after maybe a year, he was finally released on a technicality.
Wow.
The only thing he'd done wrong is he'd been a food vendor at one point. And I think there was some summons or ticket he hadn't paid. That's it.
That's insane.
And now he had a full-time job in an industry that had unionization.
Right. That's insane.
It was insane.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, let's go. Let's talk about, lastly, before I let you go, Lisa, on a good topic. What are you most excited about the city New York City going forward?
Well, I think a couple of things. I do think that what we talked about earlier, just changing the streetscape is exciting. Plazas where more people can gather is part of this streetscape. If people can get out of cars,
Right.
buses can move. Let's hope that congestion pricing and other aspects of monetary help the subways. I think they're slightly better under Andy Byford. I'm a big Andy Byford fan.
I think he's been really innovative. And
So I would say the Lifeline, which is the subway and the buses, are on a good track. And I think, when I say streetscape, I also include the parks.
Yeah.
Because they're our backyard. And I think they too are finding, if you look at all the ones in Manhattan, it's not whether the top of Inwood all the way along the Hudson River. And we're working on the east side. The east side always says, how come the parks are better on the west side, Gale?
I say everything's better on the west side.
Oh, no, I can't say that.
You can't say that anymore. You used to be able to say that,
Exactly.
not anymore.
No. So anyway, I think we're working on that aspect. But at the challenge, all the free programming that goes on in the city, it's phenomenal.
Yeah.
And all the art, whether you're talking about performance music in the parks, in the museums, it's often very accessible. And, the challenge is the housing.
Yep.
And that's really hard to find a way. We've all been through. I went out the other night to talk with people who are homeless with some of the outreach teams early in the morning, 5 o'clock in the morning. They're hard to get off the street. And then at the same time, as you know, we're trying to save a women's shelter on 107th Street. At the same time, we dealt with people who were murdered by another homeless person. That's the hardest part. But the daily life of being in this fast-moving, exciting city, which often has free programming that you can take advantage of.
Yeah.
But you still need a place to live that you can afford.
Right, and that's, I think, going to be one of our great challenges.
Right. Well, that's your problem. You can handle it, Jason.
I'll work on it. Gale Brewer, thanks so much for coming on today. Really appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
Awesome.